Hey everyone, welcome. In this video, we're going to explore how machine learning can be used to predict house prices, which is a very practical and real-world problem. For this project, we used a real dataset and applied 4 different machine learning models: linear regression, decision tree, random forest, and support vector regression. We'll walk through the entire process, from understanding the data, pre-processing it, building models, and finally comparing their performance. So by the end of this video, you'll clearly understand which model works best for this problem and why. Let's get started. Let's first understand the problem. Predicting house prices is a major challenge in the real estate industry. Traditionally, property valuation is done by human experts, but this process can be slow, subjective, and sometimes inconsistent. For example, 2 different valuers might give different prices for the same house, based on their experience or assumptions. This is where machine learning becomes very powerful. Instead of relying on human judgment, machine learning models learn patterns from historical data, such as house size, location, quality, and other features, and use that knowledge to predict prices more accurately. In this project, we trained and compared 4 different supervised learning algorithms using the Ames Housing dataset. Our main goal was to evaluate their performance using 3 key metrics: RMSE, which measures prediction error, MAE, which gives average error, and R-squared score, which tells how well the model explains the data. This comparison helps us identify the most suitable model for real-world house price prediction. Now let's look at the dataset we used. We used the Ames Housing dataset from Kaggle, which is a well-known dataset for regression problems. It contains 1,460 house records, each with 80 different features. These features describe various aspects of a house, such as size and area, like living area and lot size, quality ratings, like overall quality and condition, location, such as neighborhood, and additional details like garage size and year built. Out of these 80 features, 43 are categorical, and 37 are numerical. The target variable we want to predict is the sale price, which ranges from about $35,000 to $755,000. One important challenge in this dataset is that it contains missing values and mixed data types, so proper pre-processing is essential before applying any machine learning model. Before building models, we performed exploratory data analysis to understand the dataset better. First, we looked at the distribution of the sale price. We noticed that it is right-skewed, meaning most houses are in the lower price range, while a few luxury houses have very high prices. To fix this, we applied a log transformation, which helps make the data more normally distributed and improves model performance. Next, we analyzed feature correlations. We found that overall qual, which represents the overall quality of the house, has the strongest correlation with price. The second most important feature is GRE live area, which represents the living area size. This makes sense because larger and higher quality houses tend to have higher prices. We also identified that 19 features have missing values, which guided our pre-processing decisions. Now let's talk about how we prepared the data. First, we removed the ID column because it is just an identifier and does not contribute to prediction. Next, we handled missing values. For numerical features, we used the median because it is less affected by outliers. For categorical features, we used the mode, which is the most frequent value. Then we encoded categorical variables using label encoding, so that machine learning models can process them. After that, we split the dataset into 80% training data and 20% testing data to evaluate model performance. We kept all features to ensure fairness across all models. Finally, we applied feature scaling only for the SVR model, because it depends on distance calculations and is sensitive to feature magnitude differences. Now let's move into the first model, linear regression. Linear regression is one of the simplest and most fundamental machine learning algorithms. It works by finding a straight line relationship between input features and the target variable. In simple terms, it tries to fit a line that best represents how the input variables affect the output. For example, as the size of a house increases, the price also increases, and linear regression models this relationship mathematically. The model learns coefficients for each feature by minimizing the squared difference between predicted and actual values. However, it assumes that relationships are linear. Linear, which is not always true in real-world data. There are several reasons why we used linear regression. First, it is highly interpretable. We can clearly understand how each feature affects the price. Second, it is very fast and efficient to train. Third, it serves as a baseline model, meaning we use it to compare more advanced models. Also, many features like area and number of rooms have a roughly linear relationship with price. So linear regression gives us a good starting point before moving to more complex models. The linear regression model achieved an R-square score of about 0.84, meaning it explains around 84% of the variation in house prices. The RMSE was around $35,000, and MAE was about $22,800. This shows that it performs reasonably well as a baseline. However, the model struggles with nonlinear relationships and tends to underestimate very expensive houses. This limitation becomes important when dealing with real-world data. Okay, over to you, Nivishka.
Thank you, Kevin. Now, let's move on to the second model, decision tree. A decision tree is a model that works by splitting the dataset into smaller and smaller parts based on conditions. You can think of it like a flowchart. At each step, the model asks a question. For example, is the living area greater than a certain value? Is the quality rating above a threshold? Based on the answer, the data is split into branches. This process continues until the model reaches a final decision, which is the predicted house price. One of the biggest advantages of decision trees is that they can capture nonlinear relationships. Unlike linear regression, which fits a straight line, decision trees can model complex patterns by creating multiple splits. Another advantage is that they do not require feature scaling, and they work well with both numerical and categorical data. However, decision trees have a major weakness: overfitting. If the tree becomes too deep, it starts memorizing the training data instead of learning general patterns. This results in poor performance on new, unseen data. To solve this problem, we used hyperparameter tuning. We applied grid search CV with 5-fold cross-validation to find the best parameters. The key parameters we tuned were max depth, which controls how deep the tree can grow, min samples leaf, minimum number of samples in a leaf, and min samples split, minimum samples required to split. The best configuration was max depth equals 10 and min samples leaf equals 2. After tuning, the model improved significantly. The R-squared score increased from about 0.67 to 0.85, which is a very large improvement. The RMSE also decreased, meaning predictions became more accurate. However, even after tuning, the decision tree still has some limitations. It can still struggle with extreme values, especially very high-priced houses. Also, compared to ensemble models like random forest, its performance is slightly lower. So overall, decision tree is a powerful model for capturing nonlinear relationships, but it requires careful tuning to avoid overfitting.
I implemented the random forest regressor for our house price prediction project. In the next few minutes, I will cover what the algorithm is, why I chose it, how I tuned it, and the key results I found. Random forest is an ensemble learning method where multiple decision trees are trained on different random samples of the data and features. Instead of relying on a single model, it combines predictions from many trees and takes the average. This reduces errors and improves accuracy, since not all trees make the same mistakes. The final prediction is the average of all tree outputs. I chose random forest for this dataset for 5 specific reasons. First, after preprocessing and feature engineering, we have 83 features. Random forest handles this high dimensionality well because the random feature selection at each split prevents any single feature from dominating. Second, the relationship between price and features like overall qual is nonlinear. A house rated 9 out of 10 is worth disproportionately more than one rated 8. Random forest captures these threshold effects naturally, something linear regression cannot do. Third, it implicitly captures feature interactions. like the combined effect of high quality and large area, without us manually creating those combinations. Fourth, it is robust to outliers. Luxury properties only affect the trees whose bootstrap samples they appear in, not the whole model. And fifth, it gives us feature-important scores, which I'll show you shortly, telling us exactly which features drive house prices the most. Now, let me walk through what I actually implemented. After the shared preprocessing, which handled 19 missing value columns, applied a log transformation to sale price, and engineered 4 new features, including total SF and house age, I split the data 80-20 into training and test sets, giving 1,168 training samples and 292 test samples. I first trained a baseline random forest with 100 trees and default settings to get a reference point. Then came an important design decision. When I ran the first grid search CV using the default scorer, it was optimizing RMSE in log scale, but we evaluate in dollar scale. So I implemented a custom dollar scale RMSE scorer that reverses the log transformation before computing. This ensures grid search CV directly optimizes the metric we actually care about. The search grid covered 144 combinations across 4 parameters: number of trees, maximum depth, minimum leaf size, and features per split, tested with 5-fold cross-validation, giving 720 total model fits. The best parameters found were 200 trees, maximum depth of 15, minimum 3 samples per leaf, and 50% of features considered at each split. The best cross-validation RMSE in dollar scale was $29,040. Talking about the results, the baseline RF achieved a test MAE of 17,117, test RMSE of 28,963, and test R-square of 0.8906. The tuned RF achieved a test MAE of 16,751, test RMSE of 30,086, and test R-square of 0.8820. Now, you might notice the tuned model has a slightly higher RMSE than the baseline, and this is worth explaining. MAE improved by $366, meaning the tuned model makes smaller errors on average, but RMSE penalizes large errors more heavily, and a small number of high-value properties were predicted less accurately by the tuned model, inflating its RMSE slightly. More importantly, look at the overfitting gap. The baseline had a train R-square of 0.9818 versus test R-square of 0.8906. A gap of 0.0912, the tuned model reduced this to 0.9566 versus 0.8820, a gap of only 0.0746. That smaller gap confirms the regularization worked. The 5-fold cross-validation R-squared of 0.8783 across the full 1,460 samples is the most reliable measure, and it confirms the model consistently explains about 88% of the variance in house prices. A few honest limitations to mention. Even after tuning, some overfitting persists, and accuracy could be further improved through target encoding for categorical features like neighborhood, or by progressing to gradient boosting methods, which sequentially correct residual errors, and typically outperform random forest on structured tabular data.
In this section, I will present the support vector regression model used for house price prediction based on the Kaggle house prices dataset. I'll walk you through what SVR is, why I chose it, how I implemented it, and finally the results it produced. Let me start by explaining what support vector regression is. SVR is an extension of support vector machines, which are traditionally used for classification, but SVR adapts this concept for regression, meaning it predicts continuous values like house prices. The key idea behind SVR is the epsilon tube. Instead of trying to fit every data point exactly, SVR finds a function that fits most of the training data within a small margin of error called epsilon. Any point that falls inside this tube is considered acceptable. It carries 0 penalty. Only the points that fall outside the tube, called support vectors, actually influence and shape the regression function. This is mathematically expressed by minimizing the model's complexity while allowing some tolerance for error. The result is a model that is both flexible and resistant to noise in the data. So why did I choose SVR specifically for this dataset? There were 4 strong reasons. First, after preprocessing and feature engineering, the dataset contains 83 features. SVR handles high-dimensional data effectively through the kernel trick, without requiring manual feature interaction. Second, SVR is robust to outliers. In a house price dataset, luxury properties with unusual prices can easily distort a model. But because only support vectors influence SVR, those extreme values don't affect the overall regression surface. Third, the relationship between features like overall quality and sale price is nonlinear, almost exponential. The RBF kernel captures this nonlinearity automatically without needing explicit polynomial features. And fourth, with 1,168 training samples, the dataset sits in the ideal size range for SVR. It's large enough to train well, but not so large that SVR's computational cost becomes a problem. The combination of these 4 factors made SVR the most suitable algorithm for this task. Now let me explain how I implemented SVR. The first step was choosing the right kernel. I tested 3 kernels: linear, RBF, and polynomial. Linear achieved an R2 of 0.92, but only captures linear patterns. Polynomial actually performed negatively with an R2 of -0.40, indicating severe overfitting. RBF gave the best overall and most balanced result, so it was selected for further tuning. Before training, feature scaling was critical. SVR computes distances between data points using the kernel function, so if features are on different scales, for example, lot area ranges from 1,300 to 215,000, while number of bathrooms ranges from 0 to 3, the large range features would completely dominate the distance calculation. To fix this, I applied standard scalar, which transforms every feature to have a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. Importantly, the scalar was fitted only on the training set to prevent data leakage. Once RBF was selected, I moved on to hyperparameter tuning using grid search CV with 5-fold cross-validation. There were 3 key parameters to tune. C controls regularization. A low C gives a smoother, more generalized model, while a high C risks overfitting. Epsilon defines the width of the insensitive tube. Smaller epsilon means more support vectors and a more precise fit. Gamma controls how far the influence of each training point reaches. Small gamma gives a broad, smooth surface. Large gamma gives a very local and complex one. I tested 48 combinations in total. The best parameters found were C equals 1, epsilon equals 0.01, and gamma equals 0.001. This tuning alone reduced the RMSE by 40%, pushing the R2 from 0.75 all the way up to 0.91. Finally, let's look at the results. The tuned SVR model achieved a test RMSE of 26,116 and an R2 score of 0.9111, meaning the model explains over 91% of the variance in house prices. The mean absolute error was $15,357, and cross-validation gave a mean R-squared of 0.894, with a standard deviation of just 0.017, confirming the model is stable and not overfitting. Compared to the other 3 algorithms, linear regression, decision tree, and random forest, SVR produced the lowest RMSE and the highest R-squared. In conclusion, SVR proved to be the best performing model in this project, thanks to careful preprocessing, kernel selection, and hyperparameter tuning.
Okay, thanks you, Piyusha. Now let's compare all 4 models. Linear regression is simple, fast, and interpretable, but it cannot capture complex relationships. Decision tree improves performance by capturing non-linear patterns, but it can overfit if not tuned properly. Random forest further improves this by combining multiple trees, making it more stable and accurate. Finally, support vector regression performed the best overall. It achieved the highest R-squared score and lowest RMSE, meaning it produced the most accurate predictions. It is especially good at handling nonlinear relationships and outliers. However, It requires feature scaling and is computationally more expensive. So each model has its strengths, but SVR stands out as the best performer in this case. To conclude, all 4 models were able to predict house prices successfully. Among them, Support Vector Regression gave the best performance. This project highlights 3 key lessons. First, choosing the right model is important. Second, hyperparameter tuning can significantly improve performance. And third, data preprocessing plays a critical role in building accurate models. For future improvements, we can explore advanced algorithms like XGBoost, improve feature engineering, and try better encoding techniques. Thanks for watching.